Hello Math 130 students, we are going to pick up on page 16, section 5.6, applications of rational equations and proportion. So here a proportion is going to be the definition of a fraction equal to a fraction. And of course, in any fraction, the denominator cannot be 0, otherwise it would be undefined, okay? So also a ratio of A to B can be written as a fraction, or it can be written as A semicolon B. And it says that proportions are rational equations and therefore may be solved by multiplying both sides of the equation by the LCD or by cross multiplication. I prefer to solve this by cross multiplication, but it really is, the student preference. So when it says to solve this proportion, well, I know it's a fraction, so I'm going to multiply by multiplying the cross of it. So I have 5 times 12 is equal to the multiplication of 8 times x. So now 5 times 12 gives me 60, and that's equal to 8x. So I have to divide both sides by 8 to give me a 60 divided by 8 is equal to x. And of course, whenever you have a fraction, you always want to simplify. So you're going to have a 15 halves is equal to your x value. Now for number 2, we have this in a word problem. It says for every 3 kilograms of a child's weight, pediatricians prescribe 8 milligrams of a fever reducer. If Noreen weighs 15 kilograms, how many milligrams of a fever reducer will the pediatrician prescribe? So here you need to set up the proportion. So you're going to start by what is given. So it says for every 3 kilograms of a child's weight, it's going to equal 8 milligrams of the fever reducer. So let's go ahead and say that. So this is 8 kg at the child's weight, and it's going to prescribe, oops, I got the number wrong here, right? It's 3 kgs, so 3 kgs, and they prescribe 8 mgs of the fever reducer. Now, for my second fraction, it says that Noreen weighs 15 kilograms. So how many milligrams of the fever reducer should she have? Well, if I have 15 kgs up on top, then I don't know how many milligrams I'm going to need. So let's call that I don't know into an x. So really you have 3 over 8 is equal to your 15 times x. So when I cross multiply, I have 8 times 15 is going to equal to my 3x. So 8 times 15 is equal to 120. So to get the x by itself, I'm going to divide by 3 on each side. So I get that 40 is equal to x. And remember, x represented the milligrams of the fever reducer. So you need 40 milligrams of that fever reducer. Okay, so I guess this is a really good problem for all my nurses out there, or anybody who wants to go into the medical field, right? All right, so now we have similar figures. So similar figures whose corresponding angles are equal and whose corresponding sides are in proportion. So for example, number 3, we want to find the missing side. Well, here, the missing side, let's just call that x. So if that is x, well, on the bigger triangle, that represents my 14. And actually, I'm going to do this in different colors. I'm going to say this is my green triangle, right? And I'm going to say that this is my blue triangle. Sometimes it's just easier to see the colors. So I have my green and I have my blue. So in my green triangle, I have this x and I have my denominator of 3. Now, corresponding in my big triangle, that blue one, I have 14 and I have 21. So then here, when I do my cross multiplication, I would have a 3 times 14 is equal to my 21 times x. So 3 times 14 gives me 42, and that's equal to a 21x. So I'm going to divide both sides by 21. So that 42 divided by 21 gives me 2. So that missing side is going to equal to 2. Now, for number 4, it says the height of a lighthouse in Pensacola, Florida is 150 feet. Standing next to the statue, Natalie cast a 1-foot shadow. She is 5 feet tall. How long will the shadow be of the lighthouse? So here, I think it might be really helpful to draw a picture. So I'm not the best drawer, but let's just go for it. So here is going to be my lighthouse. So I'm definitely not the best artist in the world, but that is my best sketch of a lighthouse that I can have. So here is my lighthouse, and I know that the height of this lighthouse is 150 feet. So there's my lighthouse of 150 feet. And then it says that standing next to the statue, that Natalie can cast a 1-foot shadow. So let me go ahead and draw Natalie. And Natalie is happy. So that is Natalie. And she is 5.5 feet tall. And it says that her shadow, so let's say that there's, the sun over here. So if it's casting a shadow, the shadow is 1.1 feet, okay? So if that's the case, then what would be the shadow of the lighthouse? So here we're going to set up our proportion. So we are going to have our Natalie as a fraction, and we are going to have our lighthouse as a fraction. So Natalie, what we can say is that she is 5.5 feet tall, okay? So that's the height of Natalie. So that's our height. And then down below is going to be her shadow of 1.1. That is her shadow. So now, looking at the lighthouse, I know that height is 150, and the shadow is what we're trying to figure out, so that's going to be my x. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to cross multiply. So I'm going to have my 5.5x is equal to, and on the opposite side, I'm going to have 150 times my 1.1. So I'm going to have 5.5x is equal to, and I get my calculator, and I have 150 times my 1.1, and I get 165. So I'm going to divide both sides by 5.5. So that 165 divided by 5.5 gives me 30. So I know that the shadow of the lighthouse would be 30 feet. Okay. So for this one, drawing a picture really helped me, even though I'm not the best artist, but it is something that really helped me to try to figure this out, okay? All right. Now for number 5. It says, on the map, New York, Chicago, and Memphis form a triangle whose sides are shown in the figure below. The actual distance from New York to Chicago is 800 miles. What is the actual distance from Chicago to Memphis? So we definitely want to go ahead and set up our proportion. So we know that we are going to be comparing New York to Chicago. So New York to Chicago. And that is going to be our 8 inches. It's going to be equal to our 800 miles. Okay? And we got the 8 over here. So now when I want to compare it from Chicago to Memphis, we have something to compare it to. So what we already know is the New York to Chicago. Well, we know that the New York to Chicago is going to be my 8 inches to the 800 miles. That's what we got before. But now my new fraction, which is going to represent my Chicago to Memphis, is going to be located here, that 5.4. So now I'm going to have 5.4 inches, and it's x miles long. I'm not sure. So we are going to do a cross multiplication. So that 8x is equal to 800 times my 5.4. So that 8x is equal to 800 times 5.4, which is 4,320. And I divide both sides by an 8, so I can get that x is equal to 540. So it's going to be 540 miles from Chicago to Memphis.